Our next panel is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel. They are taking on the challenge that the U.S. intellectual property system is designed to protect inventors of all walks of life. However, as numerous studies have shown, panels have discussed, and think tanks have analyzed, invention and innovation in America remains sorely lacking in participation by diverse individuals. Additionally, in our legal field, the same lack of diversity persists. So with that said, can our IP system truly be appropriately incentivizing innovation if all persons do not see themselves as able to participate and in fact are not participating? Beth Ford, CEO of Land O'Lakes, is the first openly gay woman to run a Fortune 500 company. In her words, she has made it a priority to share the message that everyone benefits when we bring our authentic selves to all aspects of our lives, including work. Diverse voices are absolutely necessary. So it is my pleasure to now introduce the upcoming panel. I will call each to the stage. First is James Howard, the Executive Director of the Black Inventors Hall of Fame, who will serve as our moderator today. Almesha Campbell, Assistant Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Jackson State University. Suzanne Harrison, Diversity and Inclusion Co-Lead, U.S. Intellectual Property Alliance, and Principal of Percipience in LLC. Suzanne is also a member of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Patent Public Advisory Committee. And certainly last but not least is Sylvia Thomas, Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of South Florida. Welcome, panel.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to cut right to the chase on the panel, questions and answers and so forth. However, I do want to let you know that I just came in this morning from Long Beach, California. So that's called taking a double dip into Oasis, because this place is absolutely gorgeous, and so is Long Beach. And interestingly enough, we talked on the exact same subject, DEI. So I'm presenting to you today 3 remarkable subject matter experts. We're going to cut right into the discussion. Ladies, what does DEI mean to you, and what is a measurable outcome to determine a successful DEI program? Let's start with Almesha.
That's a very good question, and it's a loaded question because. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. Innovation. So as I was saying, that DEI is a very the question is a very loaded one, because individuals define diversity, equity, and inclusion very differently. And recently, I spoke at an event at Princeton University, and I like the idea that they had about access instead of equity. I also participate in a global equity, diversity, and inclusion in tech transfer organization that I co-founded. And we look at equality rather than equity. So how do we define it? For me, it is a sense of belonging, having that access, and when I walk into a room, that people understand that I belong there. And that as you create these programs, you're intentional in how you design them, you're intentional in how you recruit for those programs, and you're intentional about how you listen and make sure that there are diverse voices in the room. That's what that means to me. And so the success is when the people are in the space, do they feel a sense of belonging? Because that is so important. As you bring diverse people to the room, are you listening to them? Are you giving them an opportunity to speak up? And then are you also encouraging them to share their voices a part of that conversation?
Suzanne?
So for me, I'm working with corporations around increasing diversity and innovation and inventorship, i.e. in patenting. And we have a set of best practices, et cetera. And one of the things that we do is we allow the companies to define what DEI means to them. It may mean getting more women, it may be getting more underrepresented inventors, it may be disabilities, it may be geographical diversity. We actually are agnostic as to what it is, as long as it is defined and that it requires them to go to that underrepresented group and find out what is stopping them from participating in the process. What are things that they can do to overcome those hurdles for that group? How can they include them? And we are measuring the outcome by data. We're looking at patent applications, invention disclosures, ultimately patent grants to say, before you started implementing the best practices, what was your baseline? 3 years later, what is the patent applications that you have? And did implementing those best practices lead to an increase in your underrepresented inventor group participation based on applications?
Excellent, excellent. Sylvia?
I think, okay, yes. Good morning. And to tie all of that together, we have to think individually as well as from a perspective of our institutions, as well as our corporate partners and our government partners, of how we tie all of that data together and how we in fact are more inclusive. And so I'd like to present to you JEDI, right? Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So how do you become a JEDI? You're intentional about how you embrace diversity. And as we know, that diversity makes us all rich in the things that we're trying to accomplish together. So when we think of it from that perspective, then we all need to be JEDIs in this effort as we move forward to diversifying innovation and technology. And that's bringing it all together.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Now, Suzanne, I'm going to ask you this question. Tell me, what in your experience has been in your journey that you have found made you feel marginalized?
So I would say that my journey, I'm always the only in the room. I'm the only woman most of the time when I'm working with organizations. I work with lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm the only non-attorney. When I work with inventors, I'm the only non-Ph.D. So depending on the groups that I'm with, I tend to be different. We are the only all-woman panel in this conference so far. So again, I'm always the only. And when you are the only, the group that is the majority tends to query you in subtle ways to see if you belong. With lawyers, they ask me legal questions. How well do I know the law? With inventors, they want to understand, if I'm not a technical person, do I understand what their technology is? So again, it is this subtle, do you meet my criteria? And they will make a decision about whether you belong based on that criteria, whether or not it really affects what you're doing. So I guess I would just say to all of you, think about those questions when there's an only in the room. Are they really relevant to what the conversation you want to have is? Don't we want diversity of thought? Don't we want diversity in many different forms? So I think that's just something that you need to stop and check yourself when you're in that situation. Because while you may not mean it to be marginalizing, that's the effect sometimes that it has. And that person won't speak up. Unlike me, I'm pretty fearless. So, and again, I'm used to being the only, but it gets tiring, to be fair.
It's that fearless tenacity that had me show her that question and give it to her. We had a discussion in the back about the same thing, and I'm so delighted that you were able to bring it to the audience. Almesha, tell us your story.
Yeah, so one of the things with, in responding to the question is that sometimes when you're in a certain space, that there are some people who make the assumption that you're in that space because you're feeling that diversity and inclusion spot, that you are there because you're Black. You're a Black woman, and so you feel some sort of gap that needs to be filled, and you're checking, a box. So one of the things I do is make sure when I show up to that space, I'm prepared. And that when I speak up, I know what I'm speaking about. And then very quickly, those people in that particular space would realize, okay, this young lady knows what she's doing. She may look young, she may look like a college student, but she has really put in the work to be where she is. And so that's one of the things that I often, have conversations with people about. And the other piece is saying, where do you find the time? You are doing a lot of things. Where do you find the time? You always find time to do the things that you're passionate about, right? And people always say, when you find something that you're passionate about, it'll never be work. And so that's why sometimes I said, do not ask me those type of questions. If I show up because I want to be there and that I'm going to be ready to take on whatever challenge I have to face.
There you go, girl. All right. Now, Sylvia,
Can I just,
tell me.
before we do that, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Women, and in particular, African-American women, we have to be collectively 5 to 10 times better at every single thing we do in order for people to take us seriously. So when she says that she prepares, that's exhausting. That means we have to be better at everything every single time. We don't have the luxury of failing, because when you fail, you as the only, well, they weren't ready, they weren't prepared, women shouldn't be there, they shouldn't do this or that. So if you want to get stuff done, give it to the only, because those people are ready. But just know it's exhausting, honestly. So be careful what you ask people to do, because it's a lot.
Absolutely, but don't be mistaken, we will get it done. So as an electrical engineer working for a Fortune 500 company, I was presented with the question of, is she really doing what she needs to be doing in this manufacturing process engineering role? And so it was the perception that I was not doing my job compared to my counterpart. And so I would pose a question to you: be careful in terms of your perceptions, and that those perceptions do not become your reality without getting the facts and understanding the individuals that you're working with, the circumstances that surround that individual, and the climate in which you're operating. And that becomes very important, whether you're at a university or in industry or in government. Understanding how the climate is impacting a group of people and also the progress of that entity.
All right. Now, you keep that mic right in place, because the next question is for you specifically. In addition to your JEDI principle that you've introduced to everyone today, tell the audience, what types of initiatives have you found to be successful in helping to assure DEI in the workplace?
So I've had several roles in industry and academia. And in those roles, I've found 3 things to be very impactful. And that's to be strategic. So have diversity, inclusion, and equity as part of your strategic initiatives. And then have tactful implementation of those strategies. And last but not least, be intentional in terms of how you're trying to measure that diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, we don't have to keep saying it. We understand that that propels us to a different level, because we are embracing that diversity of thought, that the power of bringing in collective thought and those thought leaders that come from different walks of life. And in that, we are enriching, again, go back to climate, we're enriching that climate. So those would be the 3 things that I would put forth.
Excellent. Package that with JEDI, and you got a remarkable DI.
It's a plan. It's a plan.
Indeed. Now, this next question goes back to Almesha. Okay. Does the innovation space provide unique hurdles to DEI? And do you believe any of those 3 tenets tend to fall short or tend to not quite be reached as much as the others? Talk to us about that.
That's a very good question. So there's some unique hurdles. When an organization already has a fixed structure, a structure that has been in place for a long time, and you are trying to bring in and infuse new, whether it's diversity of thoughts, people with disabilities, people from different ethnic backgrounds, whatever that case may be, you have to be intentional about how you're going to go and do it, how you do the recruitment, where are you sending those job announcements. So that's one of the unique challenges. If you're not careful about where you send those announcements, you're going to get attract the same type of people that your organization already have. And if everybody has to fit within that culture and what that the culture is, then you're not ready for that diversity, right? You want it to be the same. And so you have to be careful, and you have to set that standard about what it should look like and communicate that down so that everyone within that organization understand what you're trying to do. So that's the challenge. And then the part about, what the diversity, equity, and inclusion, what makes it different. I think you can have diversity, but including them in various aspects, not just bringing them into the organization, but how do you include them in the decision-making process? One of the things that I found is that because the organization is already fixed, how do you get them in? You start with the K-12 programs. You start going back, reaching back and infusing the innovation, entrepreneurship, tech transfer at an early age, so that as those people begin to look at careers in the field, that those are people that would be ready to come into the organization and shake things up the way it needs to be done.
Excellent reply. Now, Suzanne, I need you to weigh in on this one. What can this audience do to serve as an advocate on issues of DEI?
We need allies. And what does it mean to be an ally? An ally means that when you see something happening to a minority, you need to stop it, you need to step up and interrupt it, and you need to support them, right? What we really need is we need the people in power. All of you sitting in this room today have power and privilege. Absolutely, you can make a change in someone's life. You can be a mentor. You can help them with access to opportunities. You can stand up for them and support them in meetings by recognizing their diversity of thought, that they have a right to be there. So I want you to use that power and privilege. I want you to really think about that when you're interacting with people. DEI is a lovely thought, but it's ultimately about people, right? Have empathy. I'll tell you an example. Recently, I had a client who was an executive where another executive was bullying him, and this had never happened to him before. And the first thing, when you are the one who's being bullied or singled out or treated unfairly, you feel as if it's your fault. And so when that happens, as the person with power and privilege, if you're a bystander, you need to assure them it's not what they did. They didn't do anything wrong. And because that affects their perception. They don't want to feel different.
Indeed. Now, tell me, Sylvia.
Yes.
Okay. What other questions should we be asking? Plain and simple. What do we leave on the table?
What we left on the table is how we can impact communities. So as an inventor myself, and as Vice President of Research and Innovation at USF, I often question the research that we're doing, the innovations that are very impactful to the quality of life can make a huge difference to communities that are, in fact, marginalized. So on an individual level, are we thinking about the things that we're creating, the knowledge that we're embarking upon in terms of making an impact? Are we thinking about how those inventions impact those marginalized communities? Are we embracing the thoughts and opinions from those communities to understand what the needs are? So as we go back into our labs, as we go back into our offices and our C-suites, we have to ask ourselves the question, how are we impacting those communities that have not been privileged to all of the innovation that we have at our hands? Is it an opportunity to change their quality of life? Is it an opportunity to embrace K through 12? If you think about the students that are working as RUs in your labs, what is the diversity of that group? How are we, in fact, creating succession planning for innovators, for inventors, for entrepreneurs? So think about how you can impact that succession plan and impact communities.
Can I add one thing?
I was
Yeah,
just about to point to you. Go
I
right
just
ahead.
quickly
We
want to
got
say,
1 minute left on
if your
this.
institution has a local chapter of NIE, that's one of the places that as your group gets together, maybe start thinking about some things that you can do as a local chapter to, impact DEI.
Excellent. If that's not a drop the mic moment, I don't know what is. So what we're going to do now, everyone, is we're going to entertain questions. We're going to have a 10-minute question and answer session, and I'm not quite sure how that is doled out. I believe we have mics here, we have mics there, and you can pose your questions to any of the ladies. Go ahead, sir.
Well,
Introduce yourself.
This is a remark as well as a question. My name is James Wynn. I'm at IBM Research. I can tell you that our company, from what I know from the original Thomas Watson, we already had women managers back in the 1920s. I was a youngster in 1956, and my father was always telling me, you can accomplish great things. And then there was one amazing woman that I learned about, and when I got to Harvard, so many of my male Harvard classmates knew about her. This is Tenley Albright. Do you know Tenley Albright? She was the Olympic ice skating champion in 1956. But when she was interviewed in the news, oh, by the way, she was a Radcliffe Jr., they said, are you going to go and become a professional ice skater? She said, no, I'm going to become a surgeon. What? And she said, I'm going to Harvard Medical School and I'm going to become a surgeon. And she did. She's a very eminent sports surgeon. Now, what my father pointed out is, look what you can do when you put your mind to it. You can be a great athlete, a great surgeon. Now, I met Tenley in the year 2000 at a meeting of connected to the one of the national organizations. We had lunch, and I said, you're the goddess of my youth. How did you do it? And she said, well, when I set my mind to do something, I did it. And then she, as I said, she was a surgeon. I said, wasn't there some obstacle that you had difficulty overcoming? She said, no, I just decided I would do it. I said, there must have been something that was in your way that you had to compromise. She says, well, I'll have to confess, when I did surgery outside of my own hospital, there was no place for the women surgeons to dress up. I had to get into my surgery clothes in the room where the men got dressed up. This is absolutely an astounding woman, but it showed what the possibilities were. And now to contrast that, my wife remembers growing up in the 50s, the only career she could think was being a nurse or a teacher. There were no other opportunities. Not everybody could be like Tenley Albright.
Look how far we've come.
But have you,
Yes.
You should look up Tenley Albright at some time and see just what she accomplished.
We appreciate you bringing her to our attention. I would certainly look her up. Indeed, sounds like a lot of perseverance. Let's hear the next individual. Introduce yourself. Oh, over here. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim. I'm from Texas A&M University. And Suzanne, I'm one of the onlys at Texas A&M as well. Almesha, I absolutely loved your introductory remarks and that perspective. Suzanne, I tend to push back on data-driven DEI because it's just it ends up being a bunch of check boxes and quotas and doing nothing to really address the issue from my standpoint. Sylvia, it is about climate. It's all about climate. They can get you there, but when you're there, you're in a desert. And so I find that most of these places have a legacy infrastructure that's not conducive to creating an environment or a climate where DEI can be successful and prosper and deliver the value proposition that DEI can deliver. I haven't found a single place that couples the data with creating the infrastructure necessary for success.
So I totally agree, which is why at the Diversity Pledge, we are using data to determine whether or not companies are successful. And that data, everyone can see. Patent data is public, So the goal of what we're doing is ultimately to create a inclusivity metric for innovation that companies will have to report on their 10Ks or annual reports that will be public for everyone to see. So people can make decisions about where to go for employment, about whether they will be included. And that, I feel companies need to be held accountable for that so that you don't have what this gentleman is talking about. You don't have a lot of performative, empty words. People don't feel included because being included requires trust. Trust requires data and accountability, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I just want to add return on investment. So think about what the return on the investment will be. And so when we add the data, the return on the investment, then it becomes, okay, let's embrace that.
Excellent. Okay, we have a question right over here. Introduce yourself.
Andrea Armani. I'm from the University of Southern California. So I actually have 2 points and an actual question. So the first is I actually agree that data can be misused. So for example, the NIH often reports data, but then because of small numbers, that's the argument that's made, they leave out entire ethnicities, which is obviously problematic. And they've done this for a while. So that's one big problem. And also, academic universities do this as well. In, for example, student populations, culture, climate. So they'll say, look, all of our students are very happy, but then we didn't include any of the Black students because there weren't enough of them to report the data. So that is something to be very aware of. I'm sure you know this. I'm more looking in behind me. I also really appreciated Dr. Campbell's comments about being very enthusiastic, very happy to do service tasks when asked, I'm also on a lot of panels. However, that also comes at the cost of the time I can allocate to do what I would categorize as my job, my actual job. Have you come up with ways to try to find extra hours in the day?
There are a lot of inventors in the room, so I'm putting out the challenge to all of you. The first person who comes up with that, and also the first person who can put a day between Sunday and Monday, you get the grand prize.
Indeed, indeed.
And I want to invest.
We have a question over here to my right, and then we'll wrap up over here to the left. Go ahead.
Sure.
Introduce yourself.
It's not Amy Beard with the Florida High Tech Corridor. Thank you all. So mine's more of an idea, a couple of ideas I wanted to share. I think this panel, if you take that recording and you chop up what each of these women said over the year, you've got a year's worth of messages that the NAI can get out about what we can do and help. So I would love to see that all over social media with their faces and these messages.
For a small fee.
Yeah, and pay them, right? Okay. Another idea I wanted to share, and you all touched on it, how when you're the only in a room, it's not just, it's additive. So when you're the only woman, when you're the only Black woman, when you're the only woman with maybe a neurodiversity difference, you have, there's different layers. And so it's not a single identity that makes you another, but they're additive. And when you add them together, and I don't know, I sort of think about society as a bell curve. And when you're in one of those edges of the bell curve, it's more challenging. And so, but that's where innovation is. It's at those edges of the bell curve. And so how do we support those bright minds that have different ways of thinking, different ways of being? How do we better support those edges of the bell curve? So and you all shared a lot of ideas. I think we heard culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? A lot over the course of time, but just some thoughts there on expanding that definition and looking at those additive effects of different identities.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll just add quickly, for me, when I'm the first, I'm the only in a space, the wheels are turning in my head. How can I change that? How can I make sure the next time I show up to this organization, there's another one, there's another two, so that I'm not the only one and that I'm not the first and the last, right? So if that door open to allow me in, how do I not only just open that proverbial door, but how do I take it off so there's no more door, so that other people can freely walk in and do not have to experience the hurdles that I may have gone through to go through that door, right? So unhooking that door and just walking through and leaving it open for other people, and talking to them about how to be in that room, how to operate within that space, but still have their identity intact.
Very good. This gentleman over here.
How's it going? Michael Bertow, Florida International University. About 3 years ago, I was vice chair of the board of the MIT Enterprise Forum in Cambridge. We started a BIPOC initiative for our incubation program. So what we do is we would go to underrepresented communities. We would solicit founders to join our program. And the idea is we would go to sponsors and have them cover the cost of the curriculum. MIT was all about it. The community was all about it. And being MIT, VC returned our calls, corporates returned our calls. One of the challenges that we had is, as you guys probably know, as far as funding innovation, about 1.2% of VC money actually goes to Black founder-run companies in 2021. So this is a today number, right? 1.2%. It's crazy, right? If Google hired 1.2% Black employees, would be boycotting Google. But nonetheless, that's the industry. So we go to the industry and we say, you guys are all for it. You love what we do. Why don't you sponsor this cohort? And we couldn't get any money. So I guess my question to you guys, this is great. I enjoy the conversation. I've been deep into these conversations many times, but where do you actually get the money to get this stuff done? That's my question.
So one of the things that I've come across recently, and your data is correct from 2021, but a lot of things that I think during the pandemic that people have started having these conversations, how can we as a group join together and form these VCs, right? So now you have the HBCU, the Historically Black College University Venture. So these are alums of the HBCUs that join together to have these venture funds. Then you have the Black inventors, then you have the women. So they're different. While they may not have the same deep pocket as some of those previous ones, they are starting to see where they can intentionally do something to help. So those are some of the things I tapped into to get funding. There was a student, and he's from the LGBTQI community, and he said to me, when I show up in front of in front of an investor, I feel like they don't want to talk to me because I'm different, because something I said to him. He said, I have to code switch. Right? And I said to him, I've never had to do that because I always make sure that I show up as my authentic self. So I challenged him to show up as his authentic self, but then I also gave him another suggestion. Why don't you take one of your partners or someone else, a part of your startup, to that different group? And sometimes maybe that investor that you're speaking in front of, if they don't get you and get that you're from a diverse group, then maybe that's not the founder that you want to invest in your company, right? So there were different things that we had the conversation was. And we challenge others to show up and try to support the best they can.
And I'd just like to add to that, in addition to those suggestions, a collaborative effort, right? Partnering with those community organizations and actually presenting a united front for that funding. We were applying for an ERC, and we actually went into the community and brought in the community partners that would help us address water quality and transportation and digital inequities. And so that makes a difference. The partners that you have in terms of when you go to the federal agencies and to corporate America and to philanthropists who can actually offer that funding. And again, return on investment. So they're looking at not only the partnerships, but what's going to be the return on investment. And of course, we all know they're asking the question, what's in it for me? And so when you lay down the foundation to request the funding, I would consider those things.
Justification, very good. We have time for one more question right here.
Thank you, Adriana Montaño from St. Louis University. So yeah, we need to make changes, and I think the change starts from us, from within. We have to show our students and our colleagues that we are not less than anybody else. We have to change the attitude from becoming a victim into showing them that we are powerful. Our students really get a lot from that. We have to tell them that they are powerful, that they can be great inventors, that they can be great scientists, but we have to start here. We should not show them that we are weak, that we are less than other people. That is not okay. We have to show them that we are powerful people.
I agree. One of the things that we've learned in the corporations is that you have to meet people where they are. And what do I mean by that? So in organizations, the word inventor is a really loaded term, right? We think of Einstein or Edison or Tesla for that matter. I mean, these are really big inventors historically. And a lot of underrepresented inventors don't view themselves as that. So they don't think that what they're doing rises to the level of invention. So what we've started doing is we've changed the word in corporations. We don't ask if you've invented something. We've asked if you solved a problem. Oh, sure, I solve problems every day. Oh, well, tell me the problems that you've solved. So it is little changes like that. We don't talk about going in and doing patenting harvesting sessions. We talk about doing innovation sprints. We find ways to make it everyone have a process where even if you're the only in the room, you are able to have a voice and participate. You don't feel like you shouldn't be there. And I think, again, one of the things about being an only in the room is not only do you want to represent when you're there, you need to participate. You need to show them and own that place. So yeah, it's because we want to make sure that we get more of that group in the room and that people recognize it's not, oh, well, it's just that she's special or she can do it, but nobody else can. We want everyone to be able to do it, right? Everybody has something to give, maybe in a different way than you're used to seeing. It just takes a little effort to figure it out.
All right. Well, listen, I just got here this morning. I don't know what's been discussed yesterday and prior to these remarkable scholars, but they really brought an important message to everyone on the subject of DEI. And the young lady that just spoke earlier regarding including the youth, let's start setting that message now. Let's not wait till we have our PhDs and our masters and bachelors and all of that. DEI is a pathway that we can start paving, very early on and encouraging these kids to get involved with innovation. Well, that's it for the day, everyone. We appreciate your attending. Ladies, I appreciate your message. Thank you.